Well, I think I will endeavor to start the meeting. And those who come a little late will come a little late. And normally I would pound the gavel on the table, but this is the ceremonial Schmeeckle Reserve President's gavel. So I will hold it in the air and virtually pound the gavel and bring the meeting to order at 6:05. Thank you all for being here for the first annual, hopefully not, Friends of Schmeeckle Reserve annual meeting. This is pretty cool. So thank you all for being here. I think we've got all but, we've got 42 coming, Melissa. So we're up to 31 right now. So that's pretty good. So I will ask if you have received the minutes that we sent out from last year's meeting. If you have received them, please review them. If you have not, smile knowingly. And I will ask if there are any questions or additions to the minutes from last year's meeting. And if there are none, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes as submitted by the Secretary, Barbara Dixon.
Mike Orella moves. So moves.
All right, I have a motion by Mike. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, please say aye.
Bye.
Aye.
All right, all opposed? My ears tell me that they are approved. Thank you. All right. The financial report is normally presented by the treasurer. Our treasurer is currently in Colorado and out of cell phone range. So we have a financial report, which we have sent to you by email. And I have a summary of the financial status that I will read to you. I would memorize it, but I will read it to you, which Rick provided before leaving. So the highlights of this year's financial report are life memberships. We have a total of $52,100 in life memberships, which is totally amazing. Our regular annual memberships, we have $15,135 in revenue. And the amphitheater rentals have begun, although they have been circumscribed by the pandemic, but we've taken in $2,950 in amphitheater rentals so far. Between the work of the student crews and the Tuesday morning chainsaw crew, firewood has been collected and deposited in the parking lot at the visitor center, and we have collected so far $700, which is pretty amazing. Total revenue this year for the Friends stands at $103,866 compared to last year's total of $91,130. On the expenditure side, the biggest single expenditure is our donation to the endowment fund, which we created 5 months ago now. So $52,100 in the endowment fund at the Community Foundation of Central Wisconsin. We think we will have big expenditures on the Trailhead project, which is currently under construction, and we will pay out probably about $168,000 toward the construction of the Trailhead project later in the fall when that's completed. Probably in November that will occur. So the current balance distribution shown on the lower right of the report shows $7,044 left in the amphitheater account, $168,162 for the Trailhead project, leaving $91,082.94 for the general Schmeeckle Friends projects. And you may notice that our endowment fund now totals $69,860.11. And the $7,000 left in the amphitheater account, we anticipate another $5,000 coming in over the next 2 years. So that's a summary of the financial spreadsheet that you received by email. Are there any questions? Hopefully I can answer questions that you have about our budget or our financial situation. If there are none, I would ask that there be a motion to approve the treasurer's report as submitted.
Motion to approve.
Okay, who moved?
Chris.
Chris, all right, and a second, is there a second?
I second.
All right, Jackie, second. All in favor of approving the treasurer's report as submitted by Rick Rothman, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, it is approved. Thank you very much. So the next thing on the agenda is the report on the selections for board member continuation and for new board members. I will present to you the slate of board members as it stands, and what I will ask for, if there are any nominations from the floor in addition to these, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the slate of officers as submitted by acclamation. So 2 student board members, Will Shader and Natasha Trush, are the student nominees. We have a nomination for a 3-year term of Rick Wyman, who would be a new board member. Re-election for board members includes Jackie Myers, Nancy Ross, and Chris Thompson. And re-election for 2-year terms include officers Jerry Lineberger as president, and a new 2-year term for a new officer, Vice President Ron Zimmerman. Those are the slate of officers for the Friends of Schmeeckle Reserve for this year. Are there any additional nominations? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve the slate of officers.
I'll move. Mike Gross.
Okay, Mike Gross moved, and a second.
I'll second.
All right, Donna Zimmerman seconded. All in favor of approving the slate of officers as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations. Welcome, Bernie.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Sorry I'm late.
It's all right. All right. I was thinking that the presentation for the accomplishments for the Friends this year, because of the pandemic and a variety of other things, would be maybe 4 slides. And Jim started working on the presentation for the 4 slides and pretty soon had a whole table full. So I will see if I can share my screen with you. All right, let me know if that shows up.
Good.
So do you have the 2020 annual membership meeting up on your screen?
Yep.
Hey. All right. So we will have a short presentation by me and then a 4-hour presentation by Ron Zimmerman.
You said 5 minutes, Jerry.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. All right. So recent and current projects. If you've been out to the reserve lately, you know that we are under construction. And this was taken before the forming of the concrete that was done today. Tomorrow morning, I think they'll be pouring concrete for the Roy and Margaret Menzel Pavilion. It is beautiful. And it follows the construction of the Friends Amphitheater. And it dawned on us that we had our grand opening after last year's annual meeting. So we had the grand opening, if you remember this, and this concert took place. When did this take place, Jim?
Just a few days ago.
Yeah. So this is how the amphitheater is being used now. And we hope that in 10 years in the future, people look at this, go, oh, what nice people those were that built that in 2020. But it's truly beautiful, and people are using it. Kids are using it on the weekends. People are using it during the week, and we will have a few more concerts during the year. This is an unauthorized drone photo from last year's grand opening. We did not know we were being photographed by a drone, but that shows the folks that were there watching Adam Gruel and Friends at the grand opening event. And the board of the Friends of Schmeeckle Reserve were represented. There we are in all our gray-haired glory. with a few exceptions. So that's your board. And here we have Dallas and Edith Pankowski cutting the ribbon for the grand opening, accompanied by Ann Lucas from Century and Jim. And I think we have Ross Rettler on the stage as well. So that was a good night. It did not rain, if you recall. And there's the boys. The Candlelight Hike occurred last fall. We had over 5,000 people at the Candlelight Hike. That was the last Candlelight Hike we will have for a while. The next one was canceled because of COVID. And this coming year's Candlelight Hike, we're still in the planning for. It will be some version of a virtual Candlelight Hike. And there is our treasurer, Rick Rothman, suggesting donations to the Friends. And there's our student crew from their performance at the grand opening. The first use of the lights and sound at the amphitheater. It always is intriguing to me to have 20-year-old people dressed up as animals and trees, but that's just me. Really good crowd, really good crowd. Even though it drizzled through a great deal of it, people stayed and enjoyed the evening. And we had display tables for kids to do crafts and explore, and it was a very good evening. So because of the pandemic, the Candlelight Hikes have been canceled for the spring and the fall, and we will continue to plan and figure out ways to do those in safe and socially appropriate ways. We did have our writing, art, and photo contest. We had that at the Reserve Visitor Center, and those are the winners of the categories last year in writing, photography, and art. And the Visitor Center is currently closed. So that was the last time that'll happen for a while. We're very pleased with Steve Faber and Jackie Myers donating land adjacent to Schmeeckle Reserve. So there is now a portion of the trail that allows Schmeeckle Reserve to be completely contiguous along that route there. And the part of the trail there is now named the Neighbors Trail. So if you're out walking, now you know why that sign is there. We have a Tuesday morning volunteer crew that's made up of a bunch of old folks that go out on the trail with chainsaws and drag trees around and clear the trails and make sure things are safe. And we're also working on a oak savanna restoration just down from the visitor center. So we clear trees that are blocking the trails. We get rid of buckthorn and red oak with wilt disease, and make sure that it takes a lot of work. Takes a lot of work to make it feel like a natural area. And what we do with the firewood that we cut is we haul it over to the parking lot. And we have been, in the past, we have always had firewood for free. And it dawned on us that if we had donations, we might actually collect some money. And we've collected over $700 so far in about 4 months of collecting. So you see on the right there, you see the donation box. And we are very pleased with the success of that. So it makes us happier when we're out cutting trees. This is the oak savanna area that's being constructed. And we are cutting out buckthorn, we're cutting out dangerous trees, and making the area something that will be beautiful in the next year or so. So a portion of the work that's being done out there is done by a $20,000 anonymous donation to the Friends. And that helped pay for labor to remove buckthorn and to remove dangerous trees and invasive species and clean up storm damage along the trail. So we are very, very appreciative to the anonymous donors who support the Friends. This is one of our crew cutting down a dangerous tree that was next to the visitor center. And so that's one of the things we do regularly is cut trees up, get them out of the way, make the place safe. And we also work with our neighbors who live next to Schmeeckle Reserve and help get rid of buckthorn, because the buckthorn does not know where the property lines end. So our volunteer crew also goes in and cuts and works with the student crew to eradicate buckthorn. And the C.D. Bisabney Conservation Grant was awarded to the Friends last year, and that helped pay for a crew to go in and cut and grind up buckthorn of the other invasive species that are in the reserve. We just purchased a new chipper that will be used to turn buckthorn into sawdust. And we'll use that along the trails and to help mitigate where buckthorn grows. So this is what you'll see if you go to the parking lot and you see the donation boxes. We will be putting more donation boxes out, and hopefully, like many of the disc golf courses and things in the community, people will help us by donating to the cause of Schmeeckle Reserve. We've also started working with our wood shop at Schmeeckle Reserve in creating memorial benches, and a portion of the money from a memorial bench that is created goes to the budget for Schmeeckle Reserve itself, and a portion goes to the Friends of Schmeeckle Reserve. And again, the artisanship and the just beautiful work that is done by the students in that crew is amazing. So this is one of our most recent benches that were just put in as a memorial for a family member who had passed away. There's the first guy to sit on that bench. So the Green Circle Trailhead project that I talked about, this is something that we're working along. Pardon me? Okay, this is something we're working with Portage County with several donors who have made very generous donations to this. So can you see my cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so the pavilion that's being built right now is here. The restroom that was recently built is here. And the new parking lot, which is a permeable parking lot, it will not be paved. It's granite, so the water can soak through. There's a water retention area in the center, and we'll be doing some plantings and things along the perimeter of that. The construction on this portion should be done, I would say, late October. And we will continue to beautify this area and work with our contractor in putting in some concrete work up here. So this is the Menzel Pavilion as it looks in the artist rendering. This is the Menzel Pavilion as it looked yesterday. It really is amazing. The masons who worked on this said it was the largest fireplace they had ever worked on in their life. This is the restroom, which is not currently named for anyone. If you'd like to have your name put on it, let us know. But this is the artist rendering along with transparent people. And this is how it looked yesterday. And as I noted on my Facebook page, it does smell wonderful currently. It smells like cedar. So, and this is the Century Plaza. The chainsaw crew will be constructing the kiosk that goes there. And we will have a circle of colored concrete here. And it will not be pavers like this, but it'll be concrete. And there will be a bicycle repair station. And you'll see the Century Plaza stone over here. We have received that, and it is secretly hiding on the grounds there. But this probably will be done, I would say, in the spring. Is that right, Jim? Okay. So the Schmeeckle Reserve staff will work on the informational graphics here. The chainsaw crew will work on this. And that'll probably save us $100,000 over what it would have cost to have done by a contractor. So this is the permeable parking lot. This will be used only during the summer and only for large events. And during the winter, we'll block it off so we don't have to plow it. But this is where the contractor is currently staging their construction stuff. But this will more than double the parking that is in the current parking lot at the Friends Visitor Center. This is the stone plaque that will be put up next to the pavilion. Much the same as the one that is next to the amphitheater run by the same company, and really acknowledging the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program that funded it, the generosity of John and Patty Noel, the generosity of Cindy, of Century Insurance, and Mitzi and Bernie Lavick, and the Saramer Family Foundation. We're very, very appreciative of all the donors who helped us fund that. So thank you to them all. One of the things that happened as a result of the university budget problem is that the university could no longer afford to operate the outdoor rentals program that they had run for many, many years, over 40 years at the university centers. So they donated those items to Schmeeckle Reserve. And now we have rentals that are being done by Schmeeckle Reserve for Lake Jonas and for outdoors in the reserve, along with snowshoes and cross-country skis. So that revenue will go to help offset some of the shortfalls in the Schmeeckle budget. One of the things we're looking at doing is converting some of the trails that are currently bark to granite. And we've done a survey to find out what people think about this. And we've gotten a pretty good sense that people are okay with converting the trails from bark to granite around Lake Jonas. And because of the fact that with bark, you have to go in every 2 years or so and replace everything. And it's very costly. And we are thinking that the granite will not only be less costly in the long term, but it will also make those trails more accessible to people who have mobility issues or who use a wheelchair. So we're looking forward to doing that. We haven't decided on it for sure, but that is the current plan. One of the things that I mentioned earlier on was the life membership. This is something that our outreach coordinator, Tim Tashworth, brought to us as an idea. And about 3 years ago, and Tim has a 6-year plan. We're on year 3.5 of it. But we have been amazed, totally amazed at the response of people in the community and outside the community to becoming lifetime members of the Friends of Schmeeckle Reserve. And these are some of the things that another anonymous donor made available to the Friends, so that when someone becomes a life member, they get these items at no cost to Schmeeckle Reserve, much like public radio. If you don't take a gift, the entire donation goes to public radio. If you make a donation as a lifetime member, all of that money goes into the community foundation account for the long-term health of the Friends group. So that is a picture from today, I believe, or yesterday. And that is the end of that. So
we're going to hear
Thank
from
you.
Melissa next, right?
Yes, we are.
yes. All right. So the next item on the agenda is Melissa.
Yes, it's just me. That's what it is.
All right.
Hold on just
It's
one
just
second.
you.
Nope. I get the honor to talk to you folks about our volunteers from the past year. So because of time and because we want to listen to Ron, I'm going to hurry through these, but I can definitely share any names later if you don't have time to look through all of these. So that wonderful Tuesday chainsaw crew that we talked about, here's a list of those epic humans who are out there getting all of those awesome projects done for us. Thank you folks so much. Jerry, great photo on the top. Doing a great job there. For our bird viewing area, if you haven't seen whether it is the feeders, not the feeders, the bird houses that are out and about on the reserve, our wonderful board member, Chris, goes out and checks them and cleans up the nests in the spring. So thank you so much, Chris, for going out there. Then we've got our native gardens. A few of the gardens around the visitor center, I think if I remember correctly, these were being started while I was still a grad student. We're talking like 2015 through 2017. And the wonderful Kim and Jill have been out there still making sure that these great gardens are up to par, right? Whether it's getting rid of the deer for us or just bringing in some really great native plants. So thank you folks so much. Oh, and back to that image, if I can go back real quick. Yeah, that's not Jill or Kim. That's Mike, I guess, checking out their handiwork. So thanks for that, Mike. Our gift shop. Yes, sadly, the gift shop isn't exactly up and running right now, but Sunshine has done tremendous work from the moment she stepped in there and started volunteering. She's completely turned around some of the, not only the stuff that we sell, but really getting some focused items to get folks more excited about things, themed things here and there. So thanks, Sunshine. Candlelight hike, these are long lists, folks. So again, if you want to know all of the humans that helped out with this, I can definitely share this later. But pumpkins, decorations, and parking, all those humans helped with at least one of those aspects. So fabulous. We've also got torches and canisters. Oh, and just so you folks know, those wonderful asterisks on there means that people were super excited and they helped with more than one thing that night. So these are all the folks, again, got out their torches, canisters, and put those great jack-o'-lanterns out there on the trails for us. Our food station, which had a completely different setup in the fall. So kudos to those folks who had to deal with a crazy fun transition. And our wonderful people who got to hang out with the kiddos and not so young kiddos and do face painting. Campfire and s'mores and crafts areas. Always crowd favorites. Always crowd favorites. Thank you, folks. Passport stations, some of those educational stations out there and people who stuck around for cleanup. Thank you so much, big help. We need it. And then this is a super long list. So kudos to all of these humans for getting out there and greeting folks on the trails, giving them information, directing them to different places. So thank you all so much. And then last but certainly not least, and then I promise we can talk to Ron Zimmerman, the Trailblazer Award. So the Friends group got together and decided that we wanted to create an award that celebrated someone who has really dedicated a lot of time, really invested, really volunteered and given their service to the organization. And this year it was Nisha Fernando. And sadly, we had to see Nisha. She left us, just kidding, Nisha. Nisha was a professor here at UW Stevens Point, and now she is actually out in Kansas. So congrats, Nisha. But well deserving of this award. Nisha not only participates in every program, she's there supporting every aspect of the Friends group, but she's very passionate about the reserve. So even if it isn't specifically something we're working on, she always 100% brings to the forefront anything that she has a concern with or that she's excited about. And if you haven't seen any of her photos, they're amazing. So many times she would bring in beautiful photos of itty bitty little critters or just beautiful scenery. So thank you so much, Nisha. And yeah, if anyone would like to add, please do.
I will take the opportunity to add that I'm very, very appreciative for what Nisha has done for the Friends. She was a charter member, and I was very sad to see her move, but very happy to see her move for her personal satisfaction. And we would note also, this is the first Trailblazer Award from the Friends, and we may or may not award it annually. We will award it when it is deemed to be appropriate. But I think it is totally appropriate that Nisha is the first recipient of this award.
Well, thank you very much. So if I ever come back, do I have to return it?
No, just bring your camera.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. No, I do miss being in the board and being in Schmeeckle. I do really miss Schmeeckle like so much. You couldn't even, like even when I got this photo today from my files, I was thinking, oh my God, it must be looking like that right now and I'm here. But I don't know who took that pond restoration photo, but I don't even remember. I saw that, oh yeah, that's me. Yeah, thank you for sharing, but thank you for the award too. I really don't need an award. My heart and soul is with Schmeeckle, and remember, I became a life member, so I will be coming back. So thank you, though, for the meantime. I appreciate your words and kindness. Really, I really do.
Thank you, Nisha. And that concludes our wonderful volunteer section. So again, thank you to all of our volunteers. Any of you who are here on the call, you rock. And now we can turn it over to Ron Zimmerman.
And I want to say a couple of things before Ron starts. One is that because we're doing this virtually, normally when we're having the potluck, we sit around and we talk with each other, and it's kind of a communal thing, and we share stories and talk about what we've done. As you can see, over the last year, the Friends of Schmeeckle Reserve has been extremely busy. And it's extremely busy in two ways. One, it's busy because people are using the trails, they're using the reserve. And also it's busy because you, as Friends members, are helping us serve the community. So it is truly a gift that you are giving back to your community because you are part of the Friends. And we appreciate that every day. And it just is a testament to the fabric of our community that we have people, as they say, in these troubled times, who are willing to give back to make the community a better place and to do something positive in the community. So thank you all very, very much for being members of the Friends. And with that, I will introduce Ron Zimmerman. I have been so excited since Ron agreed to do this presentation, more excited than anything I've seen on a screen in the last 8 months to get to see Ron do this. So very excited, very pleased to introduce Ron Zimmerman, who is the first director, and as he told me, the perfect director for the Friends of Schmeeckle Reserve. And so we asked Ron to do a presentation. I told him at first 5 minutes, and then we upped it just a little bit. But Ron, take it away.
Thank you, Jerry. Well, Jerry said to me originally, he said, could you say about 5 minutes about why you like the reserve? And I said, well, sure, I'd be glad to do that. And then I realized when something came out that I was a featured speaker, and I said, 5 minutes for a featured speaker? And Jerry said, well, maybe 10, maybe 15. So I have at least 15 minutes prepared. And I said, Jerry, everybody's heard about the history of the reserve. He says, great speakers. We've had slide programs on the history of the reserve many times. And he said, well, Ron, why don't you just make it something more personal? Tell us some personal stories that we don't usually tell on the slide programs about the history of the Schmeeckle Reserve. So I'm going to try to do that. And it'll coincide with some of the things you've already heard, but hopefully I can give you some insights. One of the things that I've really noticed in my 45 years here at UWSP and associated with the Schmeeckle Reserve is that things have really evolved. People's expectations of the reserve, and really the sense of place that Schmeeckle creates has changed considerably over the years. When I talk about a sense of place, I'm talking about that feeling that a location is unique. It's the spirituality, the rituals, the celebrations, and the history that bind us emotionally to a landscape and also to a community of people, because they go hand in hand. It's what we're about and what makes our place special. Stevens Point, it's not like any other place. This is the Market Square a couple of years ago. Notice there's no automobiles there. And you'll notice that the theme was firewood and hay. Yeah, it was a different era, but there's so many things that continue on in our community that are related to that Market Square. It's still a place to get together. It's still the soul of the city. And in the countryside surrounding us, there's all kinds of things on the landscape that give us a hint into what has happened here with immigration and with culture. The Polish Catholic shrines that dot the landscape, many of them over 100 years old today. The stone fences that were built by Polish stonemasons, and they still dot much of the landscape where the Poles settled. The big churches that you find every 10 or 15 miles along the moraine, just far enough that if you're a farm family going to church on Sunday, you can make it in a wagon with horses. And for those that need something more down to earth, potatoes. Potatoes are central Wisconsin. For some people, that could be a sense of place. This is the centerpiece for the Polonia Cafe a few years ago in the fall of the year. Well, this was the kind of environment that Fred Schmeeckle stepped into some time ago. Fred was born and raised in Eustis, Nebraska, just south of the Platte River in the dry, sandy sandhills of western Nebraska. He was a World War I vet, a sniper in France. And after the war, in his mid-20s, he earned a master's degree from Minnesota. And after that, went looking for teaching jobs. He was hired at UWSP in 1923, and his main job was to teach science, and that included agriculture at Stevens Point Normal School. But since he was fluent in German, he also ended up teaching things like German and education classes as well. Give you an idea of when this was, cars were just becoming popular, and the highways and roads were getting used not just by those teams of horses, but by automobiles. So Fred was here early. Fred started the first conservation education curriculum at any university in the United States. In other words, he was teaching teachers to teach about conservation. That was significant because in the 1930s, we lost a lot of topsoil to erosion in the Dust Bowl, lots of other things that made people very aware of the need to teach about conservation. And Fred came along with that major at just about the right time, because at the end of World War II, when it became an actual major at the university, there were lots of young men that wanted to get involved in the program and what became the College of Natural Resources. Well, Jerry asked me to make it personal, so this is the personal part of it. That's me on the right, that's my sister on the left. And this picture, I was born just about the time that Fred's first graduates were coming out of the four-year program at Stevens Point. You'll notice that the background is a little bit bleak. Well, it's not unlike where Fred grew up. It's just north of the Platte River in the Sandhills of Nebraska, because that's where I was born. And I had some of the same background that Fred did, living on a farm, going to a one-room country school and so forth. I didn't realize until later what an impact Fred Schmeeckle's career would have on mine. Note the early interest I had in the outdoors, forestry, for example, that's Smokey Bear. I don't know what to tell you about Peter Pan. I guess that's the mystical side of me or something. Well, because I had a teacher in junior high school in a class called Conservation that had graduated in Fred's program and had Fred as a teacher, I was inspired not to go to Ames, Iowa, where at that time I could have been an in-state student, but to go all the way to Stevens Point, Wisconsin, an exotic land, because my mentor had come from there. Little did I know anything about Fred Schmeeckle at the time. This is a picture of me when I was actually more mature. I was going to my junior year here. They didn't have pictures on the IDs back in 1967 when I first came to Stevens Point. I came in as a wildlife major, and as a wildlife major, I had done some things in scouting and so forth, and I had worked the summer out in the Southern Rockies, where I lived under canvas in a tent for the entire summer. So I was claustrophobic when I got to Stevens Point and eager to get out into the woods. Well, the only woods that were here were an area that was going to become the Schmeeckle Reserve, just north of campus. It had been a dairy farm for years and years and provided a lot of the dairy products, milk, for example, to Stevens Point. But by the time I was there, the forest was growing back. It was a good place to escape that little dorm room that I had, because I needed to that fall. And one of the things I did was I found some nice pines on the Chilla woodlot, and under the pines, wintergreen was growing. And I picked that wintergreen and let it ferment into tea, a wintergreen tea that we could have in the dorm room. So it was a real escape for me. And it has been for lots of other students too. Long before the Schmeeckle Reserve was there were people that were going up deer hunting in what would become the Schmeeckle Reserve, people that were just getting out and into the woods at that time. Well, little did I know that the place where I had picked wintergreen was an important survey line in central Wisconsin. It was the 1936 survey that was done as part of a treaty with the Menominee Nation. It actually opened up a 3-mile strip of land on both sides of the Wisconsin River to logging first, and then of course settlement. That survey line can still be seen today, but one of the reasons that it's important to us at the Schmeeckle Reserve is if you study the survey, you can find out what kinds of plants, what the vegetation was like, a little bit more about the ecology, so that if we're going to make the place healthy again and reflect a little bit more of what it was like in central Wisconsin before settlement, we have the opportunity to study what he had recorded as vegetation, because that was always done by anybody under contract to create survey lines. Well, the university began purchasing quite a bit of land early on up in the area that was going to become the Schmeeckle Reserve, but it wasn't necessarily because they thought they wanted to create a reserve. In 56 and 58, Fred Schmeeckle was still taking a lot of classes on field trips because he loved to get students out on field trips. And Gil Faust, who later became the registrar at Stevens Point, when he was a white-haired man, told me that when he was a student, he was the class assistant to Fred Schmeeckle, and he had to lead field trips out there with Fred. And they did everything from bird watching to looking at what soil types there were and the trees that were coming back in some of the old dairy lands and so forth. Well, UWSCP purchased a lot of property up there over the years. And the year I got there, 1967, they were beginning to expand quite a bit. The idea being that it would be used for student housing, in addition to perhaps athletic fields and so forth. Well, it didn't work out that way, but at that time, the university was expanding tremendously. So there was a lot of thought about growth and so forth. When they added that first piece of land in 1956, Fred was about ready to retire, but he made this great statement: someday this area will stand as an island of green in the city of Stevens Point. And of course, the natural area bearing his name is that island of green today. And it has grown considerably since Fred had seen it. Along that old survey line, some of the first property that was owned by the university, there was a real interest in creating a natural area. The natural area was really just for picnics and so forth. And in 1961, it was the conservation fraternity that created College Park. College Park got vandalized pretty quickly. And by the time I was there in 1967, there virtually was nothing left of it except a few slabs of concrete where there had been some barbecue pits and so forth. But in a personal note, I always remember this place, not only because we put a trail through here that goes all the way to the lake from the original Reserve Street, but also because in 1967, I was walking back down this street. The skies were looking a little dark, and lo and behold, the first bolt of lightning blew the top out of a large white pine tree. And that might be the story. I was pretty scared. I was a few hundred feet away, but boy, that's close enough when the lightning hits. But years later, when I was the director of the Schmeeckle Reserve, I saw some of Dr. Hans Schabel's forest entomology students tearing apart this rotten white pine log that was still standing. And I went over and was asking them what they were finding and so forth. And they said, "Any idea how this tree would have died? This was a big tree." I said, "Yeah, it was hit by lightning in 1967. They were baffled. It was noteworthy in Stevens Point at the time that when that picnic area was set up, it was covered in the paper. Well, this was Reserve Street looking north. It looked much like this way back in the 1960s. It was put in the 1940s. So it was an older road following that old survey line. And it was a well-used road. The road itself led to some notorious places. The road itself had a deep, deep ditch. So the deep ditch was full of spring peepers in the early March and April, and the peepers were just deafening as you walked that road. And hundreds, perhaps thousands of students would walk that road, particularly every Thursday night and on the weekends. Because not only were they listening to barred owls and spring peepers, but they were headed up to, on Reserve Street, from the UW campus, the poorhouse and the brat barn, which in those days, the beer drinking age in rural Wisconsin was 18, not 21. So virtually every college student could find happiness at the end of Thursday night, the poorhouse and the brat barn. So huge crowds that would follow that narrow little road up to the end of the street. Unfortunately, it was a hazard waiting to happen. And in 1966, a car did hit some co-eds that were walking up to the brat barn of the poorhouse. 2 of them were killed. So tragedy in an area that would become part of Schmeeckle. Those are not the only deaths that this land has seen up here. There are plenty of other stories, but that was one that changed the mindset at the university. Not only scars in the lives of families with people being lost, but there's scars on the land up there too. Just off Reserve Street, Old Reserve Street, if you look closely, and these were always in evidence when I was a student, but even today, you'll see these furrows, these mounds and ditches throughout the landscape. I was able to walk this with the first forester here in central Wisconsin. He was a Fred Schmeeckle graduate, Bill Peterson. And Bill brought along all of his old maps and fire information and files, and we walked the site. He told me about how people would carelessly throw cigarettes out of the only highway that went north through town, and that was Highway 51. There was no interstate that went around the reserve at that time around the city. And those cigarettes would ignite the understory and the jack pine woods and so forth. And it was an interesting situation, but Bill Peterson created those furrows that you can still see today in air photos, but you can see just flying over after the leaves have left. And those furrows are from his caterpillar and plow. And he was digging a line to stop the fire. Also talking to some of the old timers like Bob Kilcoyne, who handled the stockroom for the College of Natural Resources for years. He said that a lot of students could get out of class, particularly the conservation classes, and all they had to do was sign out a rake or a shovel and they could help put out the fire. They don't do that anymore. Well, LSD changed campus a lot in the 60s and 70s. And I don't mean the drug, I mean the president of the university. He was a real character, very outgoing, big time dreamer. And he was influenced a lot by people's ideas, and he'd pick them up and run with them. Incidentally, if you didn't know, he was known for wearing a bright red vest. And the reason he left in 1977 was by 1979, he had been elected governor of the state of Wisconsin. To give you an idea what kind of a character he was, when he was elected governor, he was governor-elect and ready to head off to Madison. And he had a little neighbor girl that asked him if he would come as her show and tell to second grade class at Jackson. So our son Noah was in that class. He said, yeah, the governor was here with his red vest. He was always eager to get involved in things like that. Well, when people started talking about the possibility of a lake on campus, and they'd been talked about for a number of years, he was more than eager to embrace the whole idea. Paul Yambert was actually our first chairman of the what became the College of Natural Resources, but at the time it wasn't its own college, it was just a department. And Yambert was known for saying, you know, we could create our own lake. If every student just did a couple shovelfuls and every faculty added 1 shovelful, we'd have a lake in no time. Well, he was an inspirational speaker, but it would take more than that. Dreyfus was the master communicator, and of course he could turn a phrase. I feel that the good Lord and the glacier bypassed us, and now we have to find a way to do something to break the absolute flatness of our campus. So it was under Lee Dreyfus that we received a grant and started to create what would become a lake and the keystone of the Schmeeckle Reserve. Century, of course, wanted to create their world headquarters north of campus. So that was an opportunity to provide them with the fill that would create that mountain they put the building on. So in 1975, excavation started. Mary Williams, a former regent, was a special assistant to Dreyfus, and she took charge of making sure, in Dreyfus's words, that it wasn't going to be a mud hole, but a beautiful lake. Because the students were calling it Dreyfus Lake at that time, even though it never was officially Dreyfus Lake. The students may have lost 2 good beer bars to the north, but they embraced the creation of the lake, even before it was ready for anybody. Swimming at this point was not allowed. This is a small crowd, I think. I saw larger ones at that time. The lake was still filling up. The groundwater was filling it in. And they were enthusiastic. The beer bars were gone, but the lake was there. This is Dwayne Gruel. Dwayne is an active member of our friends group. And at one time, when Dwayne and I were both in graduate school, and when Dwayne left graduate school, he became the first temporary manager of the University Lake area and of the Schmeeckle Reserve. And he had a crew of young people, student age, who were out trying to stabilize the lakeshore. You can imagine what that was like, and creating trails throughout the reserve. Dwayne left quite a legacy. Somewhere buried in the lake area, and I won't tell you any more than that, is a time capsule that he and his crew created. It's out there somewhere waiting to be discovered. There's also an automobile. They had no good vehicle to move the automobile, so they dug a big hole and buried it somewhere along the lakeshore. Well, this is probably one of Dwayne's least popular moments right here. You notice that he's holding a sign that says no swimming. And soon signs went up all around the lake. And of course, it took a lot of active policing to keep people out of the water. But the water quality had gone way down when they first started filling the lake in. There were horses and dogs and beer kegs in the water. Well, the university committee that was in charge of trying to maintain some semblance of order in what was going to become the Schmeeckle Reserve was so happy to find some scapegoat to hire as the first director, somebody that would deal with the problems or at least take the blame. So here I am looking confident. At the time, I remember working with this group and I thought they were nice old people, but I realized they're not even past their 70s at this point. They're not that old. Well, fortunately, there were some guidelines created by this committee, and it was a very active committee, the North Campus Development Committee. There were representation from all parts of campus, but particularly from the biology department and the College of Natural Resources. And they came up with 3 well thought out principles that we still go by here at the Schmeeckle Reserve. All undisturbed North Campus land should be designated as the environmental laboratory and assigned use priorities. And those 3 priorities are still the guiding light for anybody working up here. Preserve the wild features for their aesthetic value. So maintain the area so it resembles the natural environment. Educational purposes, 2nd priority, utilize the unique features and don't alter or degrade the ecosystems. And finally, use for recreation when it is still compatible with first 2 priorities. I'll tell you, as the first young director, I fell back on looking at these and studying these over and over and deciding how things would fit into categories. But that's evolved over the years too. Preserving, managing, and restoring native communities of central Wisconsin sounds easy until you realize we're dealing with an old cow pasture, we're dealing with a lot of old farm fields, and we're dealing with an area that had all sorts of agricultural industry in it. This is a Bob Mosher photograph of a beautiful wetland in Schmeeckle Reserve, but it didn't always look that way because that was Moses Creek, and it was a straight line ditch to get the water out of the fields and out of the north end of town. So part of what we had to do to restore, and this was a recent restoration project, there are a lot of others, but this is one that sticks in my mind because it happened in the last 10 years. We went in and clear cut 36 acres of second growth woods around that ditch. The idea being that we wanted to recreate one of those beautiful marshes, wetlands that were indicated by Hathaway in his 1836 survey of the property. So 36 acres were clear cut. And Jim and I looked at each other and we went, wow, think anybody will notice? Well, this is what it looked like after we cut the trees and started to remove up to 4 inches of soil because we couldn't recreate the wetlands at the same level or we'd flood out all the subdivisions on the north side of town. Yeah, 4 feet of soil. So we had to recreate the wetlands by digging down. And today, this is a photograph of what the area looks like. Could have been hard to convince people if we had told them that we were just going to clear cut acres, but utilizing some existing funding for wetlands mitigation land for Highway 10, we were able to do this with no expense to the university or to the Schmeeckle Reserve. Well, research and education, that was an easy one because the College of Natural Resources, biology department, even the art department and other colleges on campus use the reserve for all kinds of teaching and educational purposes. This summer, for example, with the pandemic, there's a tremendous amount of use because the students in the College of Natural Resources didn't do their summer camp at up at Tomahawk at Tree Haven. They were here at the Schmeeckle Reserve where they could have some social distancing in the dormitories that they wouldn't get up at Tree Haven. Other educational programs, and there's some things that, you say, is it education, is it recreation? And many of you are real familiar with the candlelight hike. That's something that Jim really wanted to get started some years ago. And it has grown, like you heard, to up to 5,000 people at a time out on the trails for that candlelight walk. And for some people, it's too crowded. But for others like these two, what are they going to remember? How does this help them create a sense of place? It's going to be in their memories, whether it be the smell of the kerosene, whether it be the smell of the wetlands, the sound of the frogs, or maybe the sound of their dad trying to run them down on a boardwalk. But it's going to be a memory. Some of our programs have been very nature-oriented, quiet, sometimes only a few people in the programs. Woodcock watches, for example, are something that often took place in March and April, where you had student-led or sometimes staff-led walks to watch these woodcock. And if you haven't ever watched the woodcock in the spring, they'll paint on the ground when there's 2-foot candles of light. So about the time you can only see a football in the grass at about 100 feet, that's a good way to estimate it. That's 2-foot candles of light. They'll start to paint, and then they'll go up in the air in a spiral and drop back down like a leaf, warbling all the way. It's quite fantastic. It's a neat thing to see. We'd had families who would watch this, and years later, I noticed that we'd have families come to the parking lot at the Schmeeckle Reserve up here by the visitor center, and you'd have a parent that you could talk to. And I asked one fellow, I said, how'd you know about this? And he goes, well, I came here as a kid with my family and we watched this. So we come back every year with the kids. So he didn't even need a guide anymore, but it became a family tradition. And I've seen that over and over again with people. Incidentally, we used to often, if we could, for banding woodcock and so forth, have a live woodcock, but usually didn't have that. So we had a mount. It looked much like this live bird, but it was in that same position. And my grad assistant one time in the fall of the year, remember these guys do their dance in the spring, fall of the year, he goes, hey, there's somebody here that said we've got a frozen woodcock out on the trail. This is like October or November, a little bit of snow on the ground. So Dave Applin and I trounced down the trail, wondering how this dead woodcock would end up sitting in the woods, frozen, with its eyes wide open. And we approached it. We got closer and closer to this frosty woodcock, and it wasn't a dead woodcock. It was a mounted woodcock. Dave or Ron forgot it after a program 8 or 9 months earlier, and there it sat. Recreation was the third priority. And there were all kinds of uses that people wanted to put the reserve to and the trails and so forth. Bicycles weren't even allowed the first 2 years we were here. The trails were narrow and winding, and there were very few people that were doing off-road biking at that time. So bicycles were not permitted, probably for the first 3 or 4 years, as I remember. What is recreation? Today, I hear the same kind of complaints from some people about all those students hanging those hammocks all over in the reserve on every tree they can find. Recreation. What are they learning as they sit in that hammock? Are they communing with nature? Many are. watching insects fly by, birds in the trees above them, even watching the wind blow through an aspen leaf and wondering why the aspen leaf twitters with the flattened stems, knocking insects off and so forth. But it's an experience. It's a stimulus. It's so different from just being in a city park with mowed grass. There's all kinds of life around you. And that's the difference between a city park and a reserve like Schmeeckle. Recreation. Well, there's a lot of ways of defining recreation. And often as managers, we would worry that recreation was going to be too active and so forth. But something like this, it's an act of restoring, of refreshing oneself. I think of all the different reasons why people have grown to love the Schmeeckle Reserve. And it usually isn't because they're a hardcore biologist. It's because they not only find nature, but they find something new in themselves. When you go into the rhythm of walking or jogging, when you watch the rhythm of the seasons because you're regularly exercising or relaxing in the Schmeeckle Reserve, you're refreshing yourself. You're getting in touch with nature. You're getting in touch with the seasons. You're maybe seeing things that you wouldn't see in any park, getting yelled at by a red-winged blackbird when you walk through their territory, or running across something like this, 2 fawns and the doe. It can surprise you around every corner. And that's what you get when you're in a natural area. You begin to get a sense of the seasons. You get a sense of the wildlife, of the vegetation of an area, the kinds of things that you wouldn't see in a city park or in your backyard or on a mowed college campus. Sometimes they're surprising. It's surprising to come around the corner and have a doe and 2 fawns looking at you, and they're not really afraid of you. They won't come up to you, but they look at you. We had, for a long time, a ranger program here at Schmeeckle, and we wanted to make sure everybody was safe. And our rangers would sometimes get pretty darn bored at night because nothing was happening in the reserve. So once, a couple of years ago, 2 of our rangers were out at night getting pretty bored, and then they heard something in the underbrush, and they thought, ha, it's going to be a beer party or somebody smoking pot or something exciting that we can deal with. So they went charging into the underbrush, into the alders, thinking that they were going to surprise somebody and get the drop on them, and they did. It was a young black bear, about 2 years old, looking for a place to make home. And the black bear came out to them, and they came out fast with their flashlights. And you never know when you're going to be surprised by wildlife in the Schmeeckle Reserve. About every 4 or 5 years, we have a young bear that checks out the reserve to see if it's going to be good for territory or not. This is a classic. We had no idea when we put this swing out many years ago over the pond behind the visitor center what was going to happen here. Well, there have been all kinds of conversations, all kinds of intimacy at that bench, I think. We didn't really realize how popular it was and how much it meant to some people until we got a phone call a few years back, and this young man said, I'm getting married next week, and I want to have a special gift for my wife. I proposed to her on the swing. We went, wow. Jim wanted to fine him for carving his name and hers into it. But in the end, we sold it to him. We put a new swing out. And right after that, we had somebody else call, and they were very upset. What happened to the swing? I proposed to my wife in that swing. I don't know how many proposals there were in that swing, but we even got a call from somebody that wanted to know what happened to the sign that's out in front of the swing in the water. He said, I carved my name and my wife's name into the back of that sign, and it's not there anymore. I don't know if we took it in and it's handed it or something, but tremendous number of people who have met and have become engaged in that swing. Who knows what sense of place people have about any given area in the reserve at any given time. Well, this was, Jim said, what is that slide for? And I didn't tell him. This is actually an old famous German print. It is The Forester at Home at Rest. Foresters in Germany were really the guardians of the forest, not only just the trees, but of all the life in the forest. And they spent their life looking after that forest. And that's one of the advantages that we've had here at the Schmeeckle Reserve. We have been able to get very close to what happens here. Sometimes it's unusual on a college campus to have a dedicated position to the director. It has been our godsend. It's extremely important to the success of the reserve. Now, you might notice that the little lady is feeding the fire there. That's not an image of either one of our wives. And you can forget the dogs. Dogs aren't allowed in the Schmeeckle Reserve, and neither one of us smokes a big pipe like that. But that's the image I was shooting for as director. Jim probably would replace the fireplace with a computer and a few other things that would change. But we've been fortunate in having a director and a professional staff to look after the reserve and to help with motivating others to get involved and to create a friends group and so forth. Incidentally, we have a life member of the Schmeeckle Reserve who once said, after watching Jim and I work together as a team for a long time, and he knew that Jim was going to take over as director, he goes, you know, you guys do a lot of the same stuff, but you really handle things differently. Ron's kind of a gunslinger, and I'd say Jim's a sharpshooter. It's a little difference there. Well, because we've been fortunate enough to have a dedicated position, we've been able to have someone who looks after the reserve, but also can help to organize a friends group and allies like the Green Circle Trail, the Audubon Society, other groups throughout the community to get involved with Schmeeckle. And we've had tremendous success with the friends group, and partly because of people like Jim and Megan and Jerry and key individuals. But many of you have been donors and have helped to create this sense of place. And today, instead of just putting up some temporary bathrooms and so forth, we're able to create a beautiful front door to the Schmeeckle Reserve and to add to that sense of place that we have been growing here at the Schmeeckle Reserve. This isn't just a bathroom building. It enhances the look of the entry. This isn't just a little picnic shelter with narrow beams that hold up the roof and so forth. This is something that will outlive most of us. 50 years from now, it'll look just as sturdy as those beautiful park structures that were built during the Great Depression in places like Iverson and Bucol Park. It shows a respect, a real grace for the Schmeeckle Reserve. The Penkowski Amphitheater, for example, was the first thing that we started as a friends group. And this friends group has grown so tremendously, has matured so much, and adds greatly to the sense of place. I think Fred would be proud because the sense of place has been growing here in the Schmeeckle Reserve. It bears his name. So you can pat yourself on the back because almost everybody that's watching this has been part of that group that's helped this grow. Well, that's a few little personal stories about the reserve and about its growth. There's many more, but I don't know who all is listening, so I'll be careful.
Ron, you amaze me. I am so honored that you did this tonight. Very cool.
I was glad to do it. It was fun.
All right. Well, and I want to personally thank you for saying something very personal. You done good.
Thank you, Jerry.
All right. Well, that is the end of our program, and I am astonished. You make me cry. That's awesome. Not bad for a gunslinger. Are there any other items for the good of the order for tonight's meeting? If not, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
I so move, Mike Gross.
All right. And is there a second?
A second.
All right, Nisha. All right. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you all.
This is wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you,
bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye.